So we just have one more thing to do to finish up the authentication stuff. So we've implemented, from scratch or from basically as scratch as you can get with Django, and authentication system. So we have sign up, log in, and we need to have log out. So log out is fortunately the easiest one. So it should be pretty quick. But we'll go to our URLs here. We know that we're going to need a logout route. So we go here, oops, go here and log out. Okay, and we can look at the docs again. This is how to log a user out. The logout user has been logged in, via this login, and that's how we log them in. So use logout. So that's basically all we have to do. Very easy. So we'll import logout. And even if someone, it says in the docs, oops, so I have the same issue, right? You go change that in my URLs. So it says in the docs that I don't have to worry about if someone isn't logged in and they try to log out, it won't throw an error. So I don't have to worry about that. And we'll return redirect. We'll do that. Log out user. Yeah, actually in the view. Did I change that name? Use that log out user. Strange.
Hey, Chad, you have the function on the wrong level.
Oh, geez. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so let's check in, see if everything works. So we have a logged in user now. So if I go to I no longer have a session. So the user got logged out and I got redirected to log in. So it looks like that worked. Just as a quick convenience, we can go into our base template and we'll add some links to the login. So and this will be users. I think it's a quote. Quoted, I believe. and we'll find out. Go to sign up page, login page, and log out. Need to change that name. Okay, actually, no, that's fine. So looks like everything's working and we can conveniently access all that stuff for now. Okay, so that's release 0. Slow going. But we can now create users, we can log users in, we can log users out. And as we see it in Django, there's like 50 ways to do everything. So implementing this kind of functionality is, the world is your oyster. So now we're going to do start adding our actual application, which will be a beer rating application. So we have, do we have the beer app yet? We do not. So let's create that. Start app. All right, so we have a beer app. Let's start from the top level URLs, and we'll add another path here. And then I'm going to copy users. So we'll create the beer URLs. And we'll get rid of these. And so the first view, so when we think about, we haven't really talked about REST frameworks in particular, but that's what we're building right now. So you can have common kinds of patterns. Well, you'll have a list view, or you want to see everything. So I go to a page and I just see a whole bunch of stuff. I have a detail view where I click on a specific item from the list view, and I get seen details on that particular view. I can create things, edit things. So our URLs are going to end up looking something like, so the first place you go when you go to /beers is you'll just get all of the beers. So there's different ways we could design this and name it, but essentially that's what we're doing here. So we'll do all beer. All right, so we have this URL pattern. We're gonna hit all beers, but we don't have that yet, so we can make that here. And we'll take a request object, as they always do. And we'll pause for a moment and think about what we actually want to do. So we need to have an application, and it's going to have a whole bunch of routes. So in terms of how you approach designing a Django application, you might want to start with the models and then work your way up, or start with URLs and then do views and then models last, or however you want to do it, or just a random mix. But let's go ahead now. I think will be a good time to take a look at the models. So we need to have, there's basically two things that we care about. Technically three, we have users, but we'll put that to the side for now. So we need to have beer, and we need to have, let's make this a ratings app. So you have a beer and then you have a beer rating. So I think those are two models that we're going to need to have. So class pass for now, and class All right, so we have a beer class and a model class. All right, so for beer, I mean, there's any number of things we could do. We'll keep it pretty simple. So we can do brand, we'll do brand and description. And we have for car field, we have to give a max length, which we'll just randomly say 200, and then description. We'll do a text field, and that one doesn't need a max length. Okay, so what about the relationship between beer and rating? Anyone have any thoughts?
Foreign key to the beer class.
Yeah. So in Django, yeah, in the Django ORM, we'll use foreign key, but in more general terms, how would we describe the relationship between beer and rating?
One to many.
Yeah, yeah, one to many. So in Django, yes, for one to many, you'll put a foreign key. So we want to say that a beer can have lots of ratings, but that you know, a particular rating only belongs to one beer. So you can add that here. Foreign key, and that will refer to the beer model, and then on delete. So delete everything if this gets deleted, and then you could do a related name. So if I want to get all of the beer's ratings, I'll do beer.ratings.all or something like that. Okay, so I have a rating, and then we should probably have, so since we're trying to integrate authentication, let's make sure that a rating belongs to a user. So someone who's logged in as a user can create a rating. How do we do that? So what would be the relationship between a rating and a user?
It would also be one to many.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So you have a rating will be, you know, owned by one user, and a user could have lots of ratings. So you can do the same thing here. So we can call it whatever we want: rater, user, user rater. But it'll also take a foreign key. But this time, what's the model that we're connecting to?
User.
Yeah, it's user. So we haven't made our own user, but we can use Django's built-in one. Or if we've, you know, inherited from user, we could do that as well. But we're gonna have to import it. So from Django.trib.r. I believe that is it. Okay, so user, and we'll do the same stuff. So on delete. And we'll just leave that for now. All right, and then the last thing we want to have is, let's say we want to have stars. So you could have, you know, 1, 2, or 3 stars. How could we do that in a model?
I don't know what it's called, but there is a way to give it a set of like 5 things.
Voices.
One of those.
Voices. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So there is a way. So we could just make it open-ended or something. We could just make it open-ended from the form's perspective and the user's perspective, and maybe just throw an error if someone picks a value that we don't like. But there's this, you know, it's a common enough thing, and it's also, it integrates. So the models integrate nicely with the forms. So if you make your model this way, the form will just, you'll get the form for free. So you can have like a drop-down menu with the available options. So we'll have something like this. So you could put this anywhere. We could just put it, outside of the class in the file. So I guess before we do that, let me just, that doesn't make any sense, but we'll create the field. So this will be, call it stars. And what you can do with the choices field is it's basically an enumeration. So we'll have a list of values. So we want the user to see something like 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars. But from our database's perspective, we just need to store like a single integer or string or whatever. So we can store 1, 2, 3, and but we can kind of represent that to the user as a word or a string. So ultimately what we want to store, let's say, is an integer. So we have an integer field, and there's a choices keyword argument that we can pass in, and we'll give it this options thing. And this options has a particular format. So it'll be like a list of lists or a tuple of tuples. So in this case, we'll have 1 and then do like this. So now when this ultimately gets represented as a form, this will just be a drop-down menu. All right, and let's go ahead and just we'll override the string method. So def.
Is there a reason you chose tuples, or that's just your preference?
I'm sure that there's some. I don't honestly know what difference it makes to use arrays versus tuples. If there's maybe some kind of performance advantage, but so these are not. I don't anticipate on changing these. This is kind of a static thing. Like, I don't want this to change. It's basically a constant. So I would just make it a tuple for that reason. But I don't know if there would be a real reason for doing one or the other. So return. Let's just do brand. Man, I got to figure out. I got to look into that setting. We'll return an F string, and we'll do. So if I, so I'm gonna have to change this a little bit. So if I just do self.beer, what is self.beer here?
The ID.
ID.
I think it'll be the entire
Right.
object. You could try that, but since I'm representing as a name, so I could do something like self.beer dot name self.rater dot. All right, so at this point, I think we're good. We have our models. Let's go into the admin, and well, we'll have to add this to the admin.
And you have to make migrations now too.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me. The beer and import. Okay, so let's make migrations first. No changes detected. It should not be the case. Okay, so why is that happening?
Because you didn't register them with your app.
Yes. So Django doesn't know about my beer app yet. As good as it is, Django hasn't heard the word yet. So we have to tell it. We'll go here. So save that and then run make migrations. And we can see our changes and then
Tech Python.
oh man. I did not get a lot of sleep last night. All right. So I think we're good. Migrations and our admin GUI should know about my server is not running. So let's run the server. So we can see our users and our groups, which we got just by default. And these are specifically what we've added. So you have beers and ratings. So you can add, we'll add a beer. Got my old standbys here.
Don't forget Bush.
Well, feel free to add it when I'll deploy it. You guys can add all your favorites. All right, so we'll add a rating. And here we can see that we have to have a beer. So this is from the foreign key. And the rater, this is also from the foreign key. And the stars is not a foreign key, but it's still a drop-down menu, so you can only choose.
Would a bootstrap icon work here? Like to like replace just like putting in.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely use Bootstrap on a widget like this. And Django, beer object has no attribute name. Let me. Oh yeah, it's brand. Sorry. Let me get the models.
Chad, is the reason why you're able to choose a rater that's not the one you're currently logged in because you're a super user?
Yes, I am in the admin, so I have to be the admin terminal or the GUI, I'm a GUI, so I have to be a super user. But if I were to, as it is, if I were to just put this, deploy this, any user would see the same information. So we'll see in a sec that we can't just include every bit of information in our form. Another rating. Okay, so we got a couple ratings, a couple beers, so I think that will be enough to get us started. So we have our models taken care of. We have at least our first route here going to views. And then in views, we need to actually figure out a way to do this. So we're gonna have to make, so this is just gonna be a normal GET request, so it won't be too complicated, but we're gonna need to get all of the beers from our database and then display them, or at least feed them to the templater. Beers, tools, beer.objects, all, we'll have to import beer. And then return render do request. Let's do beer slash. And this is going to be, we need to give the templater all of this stuff. Okay, so we're calling on this template now, but the template doesn't exist, so we need to make it. So we'll add templates, beer, and we'll add the allbeer.html. Okay, so I have a base template, so I can use that. And then we'll have the block contents. So here I'll put in all this stuff. So we're gonna have multiple, I don't know how many beers are gonna be in the database, so I can't hard code this. I'm gonna have to make it dynamic. So I can use a loop for beer in beers. And beers is what I'm passing in as the context. And I'll end the for loop so I don't forget. I don't know. Okay, so for every beer, we'll do something like beer dot brand. And it's double. Okay, so we're passing in as context this query set that we're getting from our database, which is all the beers that we have. And we're extending the base HTML, so we'll get that header and all of the boilerplate. Then we're going to insert in the the blank spot we have in our base.html document. We're going to insert all this stuff. We're going to have a for loop because we have we're going to have a bunch of different items, and then for each one of those items, we're going to create a couple HTML elements. Is there a question? So you can see that that works. We went to beer slash nothing, and we can see all of the beers that we have, but we still have our header that we got from our base.html. So that's working so far. All right, so let's see here. So we have beers, and we're gonna need to create new beers. Then we're gonna be able to, let's say, view all of the beers' ratings, and then create ratings ultimately. So I'm gonna close out with all this stuff. All right, so my project, beers, let's go to URLs. So the next path we'll have is going to be a create path. So we should be able, as part of the CRUD, right? So we're viewing, so we'll need to create now. We'll just call this new. Okay, so we'll have an add beer, and we'll go to our views. We'll create this function. Okay, so add beer is going to be a form basically, right? So someone's going to make a GET request. They're going to see a form. They're going to fill out the form, make a POST request. Then we'll add it to our database, just like we were doing before. The same basic pattern. So before, when you're doing stuff with authentication, Django had a lot of built-in stuff for us, but now we're using our own models that we've made. So you can't just rely on, a totally pre-built thing from Django. So we're going to have to make our own forms. Make our own forms, and then from that, where is that? That was an easy one. Import. So there's different kinds of forms and different kinds of variations of forms. So model forms is a convenience that that Django has. It's going to allow you to connect directly to your model. So we have our model form. We'll import our models. Import beer. And we'll do a add beer form, and that will inherit from model form. And we'll give it a meta class, an internal class. And we'll do this. This is a required built-in thing. So model will be beer, and then fields. This can be, again, either a tuple or an array. Make it a tuple. In this case, beer will have description and a brand. So all right, so we go back to our views. Now we can use the form. So if request that method equals post, we'll do one thing. If it's a get, we'll do something else. So if it's a get request, we'll serve up an empty form. We'll import it. Add beer form will be an empty instance of, or an unbound instance of add beer form. Then we'll serve it up. So return render request. And as context, we'll pass in the form itself. So a new, we'll create this here, HTML. Okay, and I'm going to copy some of the stuff from the users. It's all basically the same stuff. Add here. All right, so let's see if that is all hooked up correctly. It looks like I can see, so I'm just making a GET request, but that shows up. But I don't have the post request, so I can't actually add it. So we'll need to do that. So the post request we'll do is we'll basically get a filled out form. So form equals add beer form. We'll let Django fill out the form for us. And we have to do with every form, test if it's valid. Let's see. Okay, so we'll check if it's valid, and then if it is, we'll save the form. That should actually create the entry in the database for us, and then we'll redirect because it's a post request. And the redirect will be to, let's just go to all right, let's see if that works. Redirect is not imported. Create new. Okay, so that looks like it worked. So this, I filled out the form, I submitted it, the form got validated, I saved it to the database, and then got redirected to the main list page, which made a query to the database, which fetched the new this new beer. So that takes care of our adding a beer. So we have listing all the beers, we have adding a single beer. Now we need to make a detail view. And for that, it's going to have to be dynamic. So we'll call it, we'll say it's an int, it's an integer, and then we'll refer to it as the beer ID. And then views that beer detail. So we'll come here in the view. And we're going to get two parameters because we have that the ID, the integer, the beer ID. And here what we're going to do is we're going to make a also a GET request, but instead of getting all the beers, we're just going to get one beer. Okay, and then we'll return. I'm just going to copy this. We'll make this form, the detail view. You can basically take a modified version of this. We'll just cut out the for loop because we're only going to have one. And we'll see if this works. Go to beer /1. Whoops. And I can see that I get the first one. So this is the detail view for the first one. Okay, so I think at this point is where we actually are going to get into the nested part of nested CRUD. Okay. So in our URLs, I don't know if we should take a break before we get in to wrapping this up.
Yeah,
All right.
let's go ahead.
Okay. We'll take, yeah, we'll come back at 11:35.